All right, so Carol, I'm thinking back to 2016. Fair to say Trump and his team were caught off guard by this win, and honestly, the transition was anything but typical. But even now, there are reports that the White House is having to push Trump officials to sign federal agreements to get the transition going. What's going on? What should we look for during this transition period from the Trump side?
Chris, it's a really important place to put our eyes and the reporting lens of the Washington Post and other media organizations. Donald Trump has always been skeptical of sharing too much about what his plans are, fearful, as you know, during the campaign of being associated too closely with Project 2025, which was branded by Democrats as an extremist agenda, an effort to try to sort of tar Donald Trump with that agenda, one he does quietly embrace, but did not want to publicly embrace. And so this transition, his hesitance is about not wanting to show any leg at the moment. The same thing happened in 2016. There was obviously a different dynamic. The Trump-elect transition team in 2016 really didn't even have sort of folders or binders of people to choose from for running the cabinet. They had to hunt and peck for that, and they were really struggling. This time, they actually have thousands of names of people that they're considering for positions, but Donald Trump, ever the showman, is going to want to leak that out one by one, drib by drab. He knows how to play a media cycle. He knows how to get a dramatic effect. And engaging too much with the Democratic administration right now on transition makes him, I think, uncomfortable because he doesn't want to share his game plan or his blueprint or really just step into the light with that group.
I also want to bring in presidential historian Doug Brinkley. It's good to see you, as always. Look, Joe Biden argued, so did many Democrats for years, that Donald Trump's election in 2016 was a fluke, kind of an aberration, right, in American history. But do you now see maybe Joe Biden's election as the fluke in terms of where this country is heading?
Sure looks that way. I often thought that Trump was an asterisk or an aberration. It was sort of the president's club and this unusual phenomenon of Donald Trump, who mixed many currents in America: isolationism, NAFTA settlements lingering from the, and not wanting to go into foreign wars like Afghanistan and Iraq. And lo and behold, it turns out we're living in the age of Donald Trump. There's no way history can short circuit that he is the engine of popular culture, political culture, international affairs. His name rolls off of everybody's lips every moment. So he now is in the main game of American history. Question's going to be, what does he do with it? It's premature right now for him to talk to Democrats about the nitty-gritty of the transition. Everybody needs to take a week, 2 weeks, at least get Thanksgiving done to calm things down. But there will be early indications of how Trump wants to play things come December, when he starts choosing who he'd like to be in his cabinet. There's this specter that not only does Trump have 3 Supreme Court justices, but Alito and Clarence Thomas might step down in the next 4 years, allowing a very hard right justice to get in. If the votes could be there in the Senate to get that done, then you would be dealing with the Supreme Court with 5 Trump appointees. So we can't pretend anymore that he's just an oddity, the orange man running wild. He's representing our country. You saw Harris do the right thing, fold in. Joe Biden will try to be helpful. And there will be a boycotting, I think, of his inaugural by some Democrats. In 2016, John Lewis and other groups of progressive Democrats wouldn't engage in Trump's first, the inaugural then. When Trump first got inaugurated, you had a women's march in January 2017, the largest public gathering in American history to protest Trump's views on women. What's happened since that protest? Well, the Dobbs decision, Kamala Harris, we got our first woman vice president, but that issue on women's reproductive rights didn't put Harris over the top. It kind of flattened out, which has to disappoint feminists in the women's movement mightily.
Carol, we know that Donald Trump has never felt constrained by historical norms. But the truth of the matter is, as Doug alludes to, this is a man who won an overwhelming victory, who got a lot more votes than his opponent. He is someone who has been given wide latitude in rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court. And he is someone who may well end up in control of the trifecta, the White House, the House, and the Senate. Given all of that, I think of the title of one of your books, which is I Alone Can Fix It. His mindset, go to that for us as he approaches what is a very different, I think, level of power than he had when he took office the first time.
That's right, Chris. You know, when I wrote that book with my colleague Phil Rucker here at The Post, we had a section that talked about Donald Trump's revenge tour after the first impeachment trial. He wanted to basically remove from government and go after publicly all of those people that he viewed as having tried to humiliate, shame, or derail him and hurt and undermine his presidency. And as he comes into the White House now, he has said on the campaign trail, sometimes in careful, nuanced ways, and sometimes in very brazen, direct ways, that his enemies better be worried, because he thinks that there are people that should be jailed that came after him. He's talked about the Biden crime family. He's talked about other Democrats he feels went beyond what they should have. He's talked about the special counsel, Jack Smith, a career prosecutor who followed the evidence in the mishandling of classified documents and Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election results. And Trump has said that that person also should probably be in jail or tossed out of the country. And so he comes into office with a larger revenge agenda than he has. And to your point, Chris, far more power. There's a Republican Party now that at one point in early 2021, after the January 6th Capitol riot, viewed Trump as a failed and flawed figure who was going to have to leave the political stage. But he resurged and returned with force. And now that Republican Party has to countenance that this is their not just leader in name. This is the power. This is the throne. And that gives Donald Trump so much more power than he had in his 45th, when he was the 45th president.
So facing that, Doug, that brings us back to what the opposition does. And we heard from Kamala Harris last night trying to rally her supporters. We heard from Joe Biden talking about how the government must prevail, how democracy must prevail. But what does history tell us about parties that have found themselves on the losing side? In this case, very much on the losing side. How do they begin a comeback?
Well, let's look at Jimmy Carter. I mean, when he lost in 1980 to Ronald Reagan, that was considered a big deal. I mean, the whole map of America turned red. It wasn't just a Sherrod Brown leaving Washington. I mean, it was, Birch Bayh and George McGovern and Frank Church and Gaylord Nelson, all of the liberal warhorses. And Reagan did try to do very draconian things. He had James Watt at Interior, who was very much like the Heritage Foundation project but he ended up firing James Watt. He had Al Haig, who was running this vigorous foreign policy war hawk, and after Reagan got shot, he dumped Al Haig in favor of George Shultz. I don't think the press should get ahead of the thought that Trump's going to live up to all of the campaign rhetoric to go after people. And it's one thing to have an enemies list, but to actively go after people creates all sorts of problems. He's going to target 100 different people, and no, he's not Steve Bannon. Bannon's going to be out there taking victory laps, but Trump's going to have to go in and first off do away with Biden's executive orders. Then he's going to issue a bunch of Trump executive orders, and those are going to be challenged in the courts. Groups like the ACLU will be intervening, and Trump will have some kind of limitation. And then he's smart enough, Trump, to see the opening in international affairs with the problem with the war of Russia and Ukraine and Gaza, Israel. Can he enter a world stage as a statesperson? He's a man envious that Barack Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize. Can Trump, create permanent friendship between Saudi Arabia and Israel? Can they create a demilitarized zone in the Ukraine that both Zelensky and Putin agree with? These kind of things will be on his mind too, just not I'm going to bust CBS because they clipped a 60 Minutes and made Kamala Harris look good. On the darker side of that, there will be some examples, and it might be General Milley, or it could be Kelly. It could be one or two journalists. It could be Nancy Pelosi's husband. He'll find a weak spot to send a loud message that part of that hunt down of are his critics. He's going after. There are not going to be hundreds of them, though. There will be a few too many. But I don't think we need to exaggerate the what he's going to be capable of doing on destroying media and journalists' lives.